In the forgotten annals of history, where ink has faded and parchment has turned to dust, lie stories that were never meant to survive. These are the tales written in blood and sealed with sorrow, whispered only by the winds that haunt the ruins of fallen kingdoms. Tonight, we descend into one such legend, a place of cold stone and colder hearts, where a crown was a curse and a throne, a tomb. This is the story of the kingdom of Viridia, a realm that shone like a star before it collapsed into a black hole of betrayal and despair. It is the story of a ruthless king, a sorrowful queen, and a daughter of light born into a world of shadows. They say her name was Princess Alara, but history remembers her only by the title she earned in her final, tragic hours, the Princess of Broken Chains. Her tale is not one of valor or victory, but a harrowing lesson in how even the purest of hearts can be ensnared by the gilded cage of ambition, and how the silence that follows a scream is the most deafening sound of all. Before the marble halls echoed with whispers of treason, they rang with the ironclad steps of a man who forged his own destiny from the embers of war. King Valerius was not born to rule. He seized power with a bloodied sword and a will of unyielding steel. He emerged from the borderlands, a charismatic warlord whose promises of glory and stability were a siren song to a fractured people tired of chaos. His ascent was brutal and swift. He united warring factions through force, his enemies either bending the knee or finding their heads adorning the fortress walls. He was a man carved from the very mountains he conquered, harsh, formidable, and unmovable. He built his throne not on a foundation of divine right, but on the bones of those who dared to stand against him. The kingdom he called Viridia was his masterpiece, a testament to his ambition. But a foundation built on fear is fragile, and the cracks were already beginning to form long before the first stone of his palace was laid. King Valerius believed he could command loyalty, but he only ever understood obedience, a currency that always comes with a price of betrayal. To legitimize his iron-fisted rule and quell the anxieties of the old noble houses, King Valerius needed a queen. He found her in Seraphina, the last daughter of a conquered royal line. She was his most prized acquisition, a symbol of the old world bowing to the new. Queen Seraphina was a vision of grace and melancholy, her beauty as profound as the sorrow that swam in her eyes. She moved through the cold, imposing halls of Valerius's palace like a ghost, a living relic of a gentler time. While the king ruled with an iron fist, the queen captured the hearts of the people with her kindness and wisdom. She established orphanages, tended to the sick, and offered counsel that her husband rarely heeded. She was the kingdom's soul, a soft counterpoint to the king's brutal strength. But in the shadows of the court, her influence was seen as a threat. The king, possessive and insecure, saw the people's love for her not as a blessing, but as a challenge to his own authority. She was his queen, but she was also his first prisoner, her gentle spirit locked within the gilded cage of his burgeoning tyranny. Into this kingdom of simmering tension, a fragile light was born. Princess Alara arrived with the first snows of winter, her cries echoing through the sterile silence of the royal chambers. For a fleeting moment, her birth seemed to thaw the icy heart of the king and mend the fractures in the court. She was perfection, a blend of her father's fierce eyes and her mother's gentle spirit. The kingdom celebrated, seeing in the infant princess a promise of a brighter future, a union of Valerius's strength and Seraphina's grace. Queen Seraphina poured all her love and thwarted dreams into her daughter, shielding her from the court's corrosive politics. She would sing Alara lullabies of the old kingdom, tales of heroes and honor that were becoming forbidden whispers in Valerius's realm. The king, for his part, saw the princess as his ultimate legacy, the purest symbol of his bloodline, the continuation of his power. But innocence is a fragile thing in a court built on secrets. Princess Alara was a beacon of hope, but in a place so steeped in darkness, even the brightest light is destined to cast a long and terrible shadow. As Princess Alara grew, the palace of Viridia transformed. What was once a symbol of power became a labyrinth of secrets, where whispers slithered like snakes through the tapestries and every shadow held a conspirator. King Valerius, consumed by the fear of losing what he had stolen, saw enemies in every corner. He trusted no one, not even his own council. Spies became his eyes and ears, their venomous reports pitting noble against noble, turning allies into rivals. Envy curdled the hearts of the courtiers. They envied the queen's influence over the common people and the king's doting affection for his daughter. They whispered poison into the king's ear, fueling his paranoia. They spoke of the queen's quiet sadness, twisting it into discontent. They hinted that her heart still belonged to her vanquished homeland. The air in the palace grew thick and suffocating, charged with unspoken resentments and clandestine plots. Princess Ilara, in her innocence, would play in the grand halls, unaware that the smiling faces that greeted her belonged to people who were sharpening daggers in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to strike at the heart of the royal family. A crown won by the sword is a heavy burden, and King Valerius's ambition knew no bounds. Ruling Veridia was not enough. He yearned to carve his name into the very fabric of history, to build an empire that would dwarf all others. This insatiable hunger began to corrupt him, twisting his strength into cruelty. He levied crippling taxes on his people to fund endless wars, his armies marching across the land like a plague of locusts. He demanded absolute loyalty, and the slightest hint of dissent was met with public execution. The gallows in the capital square became a permanent, grim fixture. He ignored the queen's pleas for mercy and diplomacy, dismissing her wisdom as feminine weakness. He saw compassion as a flaw to be purged. The king who had once been a symbol of order was now a tyrant, his ambition a raging fire that was beginning to consume the very kingdom he had built. He became isolated, a solitary figure on his throne of shadows, his only companions the ghosts of his victims and the growing paranoia that festered in his mind. He was building an empire, but he was losing his soul. While the king waged war on the world, Queen Seraphina fought a silent battle within the palace walls. Each day was a performance of dignified composure, a mask she wore to hide her breaking heart. She watched the man she married transform into a monster, his touch turning from possessive to cold, his words from commanding to cruel. Her counsel was rejected, her warnings ignored. She became a decorative fixture, her only purpose to produce an heir and lend an air of legitimacy to a brutal regime. Her true prison was not the stone walls but the suffocating loneliness. She found her only solace in her daughter, Princess Ilara. In the princess's laughter, she found a fleeting echo of the happiness she had lost. But this, too, became a source of pain. How could she protect this innocent child from the monster her father was becoming? The queen would often be found in the royal gardens at dusk, her tears falling silently onto the wilting roses, a mirror of her own decaying hope. Her struggle was invisible to all but a few, a quiet tragedy unfolding in the heart of the kingdom's opulent decay. Princess Ilara blossomed amidst the thorns of her father's court. She was taught swordsmanship by the king's command and poetry by her mother's request, a child forged in conflict. She was dutiful and bright, her spirit a fragile flame that refused to be extinguished by the palace's oppressive gloom. But her destiny was not her own. She was a pawn in a game she did not understand. For the king, she was a tool, a bride to be sold to the highest bidder in a political alliance that would further his imperial dreams. He paraded her before visiting dignitaries, her value measured in acres of land and battalions of soldiers. For the queen, she was a painful reminder of a life she could never give her, a life of freedom and love. Princess Ilara felt the invisible chains closing in around her. She was surrounded by luxury but starved of genuine affection, save for the desperate, protective love of her mother. She dreamed of a world beyond the castle walls, a world she only read about in the books her mother gave her. But her fate was already being written in the cold calculus of power, a tragic footnote in her father's bloody history. Every dynasty has a secret that, once unearthed, can bring it to ruin. In the house of Valerius, that secret was hidden within a locked chest in the queen's chambers. It was not a plot against the king, but something far more personal and, in his eyes, far more treacherous. It was a collection of old letters, written years before her marriage, from a nobleman of her homeland to whom she had once been betrothed, a man Valerius himself had slain during his conquest. A rival courtier seeking to destroy the queen's influence forever discovered the letters and presented them to the paranoid king. The spy twisted the words of innocent, youthful love into a narrative of an ongoing, treasonous affair. He went further, planting the seed of the ultimate poison, that Princess Alara, the king's pride and legacy, was not his own. For a man like Valerius, whose entire identity was built on power, bloodline, and possession, this was a betrayal he could not endure. The lie took root in his mind like a black fungus, and his paranoia finally blossomed into a murderous rage. The queen's past love became a ghost that would doom them all. The king's madness became the kingdom's curse. Fueled by the poison of the secret, Valerius unleashed a reign of terror unlike any before. He accused loyal generals of treason and had them executed without trial. He saw his queen's every glance as a confirmation of her deceit. The kingdom, already groaning under the weight of his wars and taxes, finally broke. The rebellion started not with an army, but with a starving mother's cry in the capital's market square. It grew into a riot, then an insurrection. The people, who once saw Valerius as their savior, now saw him as their demon. They stormed the palace gates, their anger a tidal wave of fire and steel. The gilded halls that had hosted lavish banquets now ran with the blood of guards and courtiers. The carefully constructed facade of King Valerius's power crumbled in a single night of fire and fury. The throne he had built on bone was about to be reclaimed by the ghosts of his victims, and the entire royal family was trapped in the epicenter of the storm. As chaos engulfed the palace, King Valerius, his mind completely shattered by rage and betrayal, sought out the queen. He found her in Princess Alara's chambers, shielding their terrified daughter. He no longer saw the woman he had married, the mother of his child. He saw only a traitor. With the roar of the rebellion echoing outside, he confronted her, the damning letters clutched in his fist. Her pleas of innocence were lost to his madness. He accused her of defiling his bloodline, of making him a fool. In a final, horrific act of tyranny, as Princess Alara watched in frozen terror, the king's hands closed around the queen's throat. Her last breath was a choked whisper of her daughter's name. Queen Seraphina, the soul of Viridia, died on the cold marble floor, not at the hands of the rebellion, but at the hands of the man who had vowed to protect her. Her death was the final, tragic chord in a symphony of sorrow, a testament to a love that had been systematically and brutally destroyed by power. The murder of the queen sealed the king's fate. When the rebels finally breached the royal chambers, they found him not as a defiant monarch but as a broken man, staring blankly at the body of his wife. The fearsome warlord was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. They dragged him from the palace, through the very streets he once paraded through in triumph. The people who had once cheered his name now spat on him, their hatred a physical force. There was no trial, no ceremony. They took him to the gallows he himself had built. In his final moments, King Valerius did not beg for his life or ask for forgiveness. He simply stared into the crowd, perhaps searching for a single face that did not despise him. He found none. As the rope tightened, his reign ended as it had begun, with violence, blood, and the resounding silence of death. The crown he had killed for lay tarnished in the mud, a worthless trinket that had cost him everything: his kingdom, his family, and his humanity. With the king and queen dead, all eyes turned to Princess Alara. She was the last remnant of the blood-soaked regime. To the revolutionaries, she was not an innocent child who had just witnessed her mother's murder. She was a symbol of the tyranny they had overthrown. They could not let her live as a princess, a potential rallying point for royalist sympathizers. But they lacked the cruelty to execute a child, so they chose a fate worse than death. They took her from the blood-stained chambers of the palace and led her deep into the castle's dungeons, to a cell where sunlight had never reached. They broke the royal chains of her lineage, her silks and jewels, and replaced them with cold, heavy iron. She was no longer Princess Alara. She was prisoner 734. Her name was struck from the records, her existence erased. She, the princess of broken chains, was left to rot in the darkness, alone with the ghosts of her family and the memory of her mother's last scream. Her freedom was a crueler prison than any she had known before. The kingdom of Viridia did not rise from the ashes. The rebellion that had united against a common enemy soon fractured, its leaders turning on one another in their own lust for power. The realm descended into a bloody civil war that lasted for decades, making the tyranny of King Valerius seem like a distant, orderly memory. The grand palace was looted and burned, its magnificent halls becoming a home for rats and creeping vines. It stood as a skeletal warning on the horizon, a monument to ambition's folly. The story of the royal family became a dark fairy tale told to frighten children, their names fading into legend. No one ever spoke of the prisoner in the dungeon. Princess Ilara was forgotten by the world, a silent soul entombed beneath the ruins of her own home. History, as it so often does, moved on, its pages filled with the stories of new victors, while the silent suffering of the lost princess was left to be absorbed by the cold, indifferent stone of her cell. The tale of the Princess of Broken Chains is a chilling reminder that history is not a grand tapestry of heroes and villains, but a chaotic mosaic of human frailty. It shows us how ambition, left unchecked, becomes a cancer that devours everything it touches: love, honor, and innocence. The king sought an empire but built a graveyard. The queen sought peace but found only pain. And the princess, a symbol of hope, became a forgotten ghost, her only legacy the silence of her eternal prison. Her chains were broken not to set her free, but to bind her to a fate more terrible than death. It teaches us that thrones are often built on graves, and the weight of a crown is measured not in gold but in sorrow. The silence of Viridia's ruins asks a haunting question. How many other stories, how many other lost princesses, lie buried beneath the foundations of our own world, their tragedies erased, their screams unheard? History bleeds, and its echoes are written in the cries of kings, queens, and lost princesses. This was the Fear Room. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more dark history tales.